we were looking at how to create a simple web application using Streamlit. We created our first application with the title, and we started reading a data set, and then we displaying that in a tabular format. So I'm going to start creating a sidebar wherein I want to filter this data. I want to filter this data probably by, let's say, a country column or a player column. So I need to have a drop down in which I will select the country, and then I want to filter my data frame and show only for that particular country alone. So I need to create a drop down. So typically, to create drop downs in normal HTML with any frameworks will be slightly difficult to start with, whereas with Streamlit we have a lot of widgets, input widgets we have, using which we can create a lot of input widgets like drop downs and sliders, text boxes, text areas, and then radio buttons, check boxes, and PDF uploads, file uploads, and a lot of other widgets we have, which are very handy while creating a web application. So let's create our first web application, which is let's say a drop down. Okay, so I'm going to create a drop down here. So what I'm going to do is, before creating this data frame, I'm going to create a simple drop down. So right now I'll keep few countries alone. Let's say let me take this as countries equal to India, and let's say I'm going to keep it only for India, Australia, and probably let's say Pakistan. So in this case, later on we will pick all the countries that is available in the data, but just to try out how to create a simple drop down, we'll just use these three options for now. So in Streamlit, the way we create input widgets is we first create a variable. Let's say country underscore filter. Country filter is equal to st. St is for Streamlit. Streamlit dot select box. So select box is for a drop down. So like select box, you have multiple other things. St dot text input, slider, and multiple things. So once we create a drop down, so you want to first understand what are the different options that are available in selecting a drop down box. So you can just search for st.select box. You will go to the documentation page. So all I've done is just searched it for st.select box. Going to the Streamlit docs, you will understand the options that are available, the parameters that we can pass to this particular function. So always documentation is the place where you will go and find a lot of relevant information. So what it says, you can have a label, which is mandatory. You need to provide label is something like a title that you will give it to your drop down that user will see in the front face, and you will give a lot of options. The options is currently the countries India, Australia, and Pakistan, and all the other parameters are mostly optional. We need these two which are mandatory. A lot of other parameters are available. You can also see how to use them in the example side here and how it will look like. So this is how it's going to look like. So they have different options like email, home phone, and mobile phone. So you see these three options. The first one is the label. How would you like to be contacted? So that is what you see here. And then st.write, you selected whatever options that they have selected. It's currently displayed here. So let's use this. So always keep in mind, not just for this particular package, any package you're using in Python, make sure always utilize their documentation as much as possible. So we are going to use a label parameter. So label, we are going to say select a country, and then we are going to say options is equal to the list of countries that we have, right? That we will pass it as options here. That's it. So what happens is, it will display the drop down with these options. which is India, Australia and Pakistan, and whatever the user selects always will be saved in that particular variable called country filter in the backend. So you can use this variable to understand what the user has selected. So for example, if I don't have the data frame, let's see, I'm commenting it out for a minute, and then I'm going to say st.write, a very simple way of writing something in the web application, whatever the user has selected. So for example, I'm going to say you have selected the country, and let me give the country name, country filter. So whatever the user is going to select will be available in this variable country filter, and if they change, the updated value will also be available in this variable, and this variable is currently utilized here. Whenever someone changes the drop down or selects a particular country, you will see this message, you have selected the country, and the country name will be appearing. So I'm just formatting the string. So in Python, this is one way of formatting a string, or you have to do a string concatenation. So you have selected the country. Until here it's a static text, and this is a dynamic text which has to come from a variable. So because of that, I'm adding a command F, which is a format. So I'm saying format the string based on this variable country filter. So for the variable, I'm wrapping it with curly braces. Okay, otherwise I have to do string concatenation, which is not that handy. So this is the best way to do it in Python. So now when we go back to our application, so you will see a drop down coming here with India, Australia and Pakistan. So if I change the drop down Australia, so it takes some time and then returns it as Australia. If I change it to Pakistan, so you can see it is running here. So let's take, if I change it back to India, so you can see the application is running, and it takes some time to replicate. We are not doing any complex operations here. All we are doing is selecting a particular filter, which is a drop down, and then displaying the value that user is selecting. But for this very simple operation, the application is taking some time, which is not supposed to be happening. The reason why this delay is happening is we are reading this data every time. That is, whenever a drop down is changed, the entire script will run. That is the issue due to which there is a delay. So whenever someone changes the country, all the code is almost all the code, not all, but almost all the code is rerun. So because of which every time it will read the data, keep reading the data every time. So if this data is large, for example, this data is around 5 MB. So when you read it from the URL, every time it's going to download that 5 MB. Every time I change the filter, it's going to rerun the code from the beginning and then change it. So it's going to download the data each and every time, and that is why you see a small delay in that. So let's address this delay a little bit, make sure that we don't have too much of delay, and then we will come back to this drop down. Otherwise, during development, every time a very small change, if you take few seconds, it will be very annoying, first of all, and then development speed will also get impacted. So very first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to cache this data. That is, I don't want to read this each and every time. I just want to read it only once and store it as long as this application is running. Caching is always better. That is, as long as the data is not going to change and as long as this application is running, I shouldn't read this data each and every time. I should read it once, store it in RAM. So that is what caching will do. So in order to cache this data, we have to create a function using which we can cache it in Streamlit. So why are we doing this right away? Because moment we keep doing a lot of other code changes, every code change, if it's going to take few seconds, it's going to be very difficult for us to do the development. So let's address this first. So here I'm going to create a function, load data. All this function will do is take the data, which is whatever we wrote here, right? So I'm going to just take it here within this function and return this data, and I'll say data is equal to load data. So instead of directly reading the data from the URL, I'm reading the data through a function. That is the first change that I've done. And what I'm going to do is add something called as a decorator above the function called st.cache_data. So what this will do is, this will make sure that when someone calls this function for the first time, it will do the operation, and whatever it returns, it will store it in the RAM. So that if someone calls this function for the second time, it will not execute it entirely. It will return the output alone directly, because it would have cached it by default. So in order to cache this function, we are using st.cache_data. So you can read more about this. You can just search for st.cache_data, see how see the documentation, see the examples how they are using. So here all we have done is, instead of reading the data directly, we are first placing the reading part inside a function, typical normal Python function, right? So it's having a def, and then load data is the function name. It currently doesn't take any arguments, and I'm reading this URL using pandas and then returning the data. And this is the place where I'm calling the function, but I'm adding something called as a decorator at, and it's very specific to Streamlit here in this particular case. So only if you import Streamlit, this is going to work. So at Streamlit, that is st.cache_data. So moment I do this and run my function, so first time it will load the data and it will cache it. So second time if you refresh it, it will be pretty fast. So you will see it loads very immediately. Now if I change the country, you see it's coming very immediately without any further delay in it. So what we have done, we just cached the data, so it's not reading every now and then. So all we have done is, the reading part of the data is moved to a function, and the function is decorated with the decorator called at st.cache_data. So as long as this session is active, that is, as long as I'm not going to close this terminal, this function will run it. And if I want, I can clear the cache also. So I can use clear cache here. It will clear all the cache that are there. And if I run this function, run this this application, refresh this application, initially it will take some time. So you see that it is running, and then it will cache it again. Now anytime when I change the filter, immediately you will see the filter value coming in. So these are some small things that we typically take care of while developing the application, to make sure that the application is running fast and it's not taking too much of time to load any components. So very small changes, but it will help the end user a lot. It will not irritate the end user by having too much of loading time. Okay, so the change that we have done is caching, and then we have added a filter called country, and whatever country that the user is selecting, you will have option to get that value. So how are you getting it? Using the variable country filter. So whenever you use this variable inside this file, it will always have the latest value that the user has selected in the drop down. Okay, so now we can use this to filter our data. So instead of saying what the country filter the user has selected, I'm going to do a filter. I'm going to filter the data. Filter the data is equal to data country. I hope you guys are comfortable with pandas. So whatever the country filter, whatever the country that the user has selected, I'm going to use that to filter my data, and I'm going to display only the filtered data here. That's it. So instead of displaying the entire data, I'm going to display only the data which belongs to a certain country based on what the user has selected. That's it. Not much. So how am I doing the filtering part? Whatever variable that I've used here, right? Country filter. So that will be holding the current country value, and I'm going to filter it, and then display the data frame, filter the data frame, not the entire data frame. So now let's refresh the dashboard. So now you see I've selected India. It's case sensitive, keep that in mind. So only India's record is available for us now. So if I select Australia, immediately I can see only Australia's record is coming out here. And if I have, let's say if I select Pakistan, only Pakistan country is going to come in. You can have multi-select as well. So you have something called st.multi-select. If you want to select more than one country, you can have that option. So for example, instead of select box, you can say st.multi-select and then see what is this. So it's almost same options, label and then options. So instead of select box, if you give multi-select, it will be a list. Currently it is a string. Country filter is a string. If you use multi-select, it will be of type list. So we will worry about multi-select bit later. So let me reiterate. All we have done is a very simple caching mechanism. We loaded the data using a function and then caching it, and then using a country filter here, which says which takes two options. One is label and another one is options. Options is currently that we have hard coded that we need only these three countries. So we are using that here. So whenever someone changes the country, we are displaying what country they have selected, and we are also filtering the data what country they used. So Panda's way of filtering is, instead of this, if you say India, it's going to filter only for India here, but this has to be dynamically captured. So I'm going to say country filter. So this is normal Panda's filtering, and I'm displaying the filtered data here. So if you look at the UI, so we have the country selected by the user, and we are displaying the corresponding rows alone in the tabular format. The next step that we are going to do is, this country filter is occupying the entire width, and it is unnecessary. I don't want to see this filter occupying the entire screen. Instead, typically when you see in applications, filters either they will be on top or side and not occupying the entire space. So what I'm going to create is a sidebar. I'm going to create a sidebar, and I'm going to place this filter in the sidebar. So the way we create a sidebar is very simple. Now for example, we said st.header cricket analysis, right? So here I will just say st.sidebar.header. That's it, no other change. So st sidebar.header if I do, and then if I refresh my page, so I'll keep it to always rerun. So you see there is a very nice sidebar created for us. I didn't do any major change. All I've done is, instead of st.header, I've replaced it with st.sidebar.header. So likewise, the select box also, I will move it to sidebar by just including st.sidebar.select box. No other major change. So I'm just introducing it part of the sidebar alone. That's it. So it will automatically move the select box, that is drop down, to the sidebar. You can see it here. So it's automatically refreshing. As I change the code, this will get automatically refreshed. So now I can change it to any other country that I'm looking for. So usually filters on the left hand side, and outputs, charts and outputs will be on the right hand side. Typical way of creating the application here, so that user know what controls they have. Those will be displayed in the left hand side. You can have multiple other filters. For example, I can have a year filter. So now we can create multiple filters, but before I create that, we have created only 3 countries, right? Ideally we would like to get all the countries from the data itself. So So what I will do is, because the data has more number of countries, around 22 countries it has, so I can read the countries from the data itself. So in pandas, how do you get the unique values from a particular column? So the data country column dot unique. So it will get all the unique values from the country column, and I can convert it into a list if I want, or you can keep it with dot unique also, which will be like a numpy array. That is also fine, it will able to take it up. So instead of me hard coding the country name, I'm dynamically picking the country name from the data itself, so that all the countries data, that is the names, will be available in the drop down. So you will see now more number of countries, around 22 countries you will be seeing. So for example, this is for England, and this is for Sri Lanka, and this is for, so India will be somewhere around here. So you can define what should be the default country, and you can have multiple other customization done on top of this drop down. So you can say here, you can say index equal to 2, that is the second country should be selected by default in this list. So here when you go to the dashboards, you can see Bangladesh, third, index 2 means position 3, right? So the third country will be selected by default when you refresh the application. So you can see, you can identify the position of India and then put that here. So a lot of customization you can do, but I'm avoiding those customization. I'm just keeping it simple. So whatever is the first country alphabetically will come on top, and then you can select the countries, and you'll able to see them getting filtered on the right hand side. So what we have done, not much. Instead of hard coding the country name, I'm pulling it from the data itself. So pandas data frame object, which is data, I'm accessing a particular column in that called country column. How do I know it's a country column? Because I know I can see it here, right? Capital C country here, and then taking unique values from that. So that will give me all the unique values in that particular column. Otherwise it will get duplicated if I don't use unique, right? The values will be duplicated here. So you can see the duplicate values will be there, which is not good. I'm pulling out all the duplicate values, which is not correct. So here dot unique will make it easier for us. So you will see only unique values appearing in our country filter. A very simple way of creating a country filter.